Okay, so this video is not so much a case study as an overview of an existing programmatic SEO site that I built. I built it in March this year, 2022. So it's been launched for about 8 months. And since I've launched, I haven't really done anything with this site. The site's carspecs.org, and basically it's a database of specifications for cars. So you can look at depreciation values, cargo space, gas mileage, headroom, horsepower, wiper blade sizes, and then you can search through the list of manufacturers, which auto updates based on what information is available in the database. Choose the model, and then it takes you to the page. The page has information. You can jump to specific years. So if you want to go back to 89, you can. You can see what size wiper blades. There's not a huge amount of information on this one, but then you could go back and look at oil capacity for different manufacturers. And it'll tell you the different capacities for the different types of vehicle. So there's a lot of information on the page. All of this site was built programmatically. So all these templates just sort of grab the information from the database and then output them on the page. So first of all, I want to go back and show you where I got the data. So this is the site that I actually scraped the information from, which is an auto blog, which has a list of specifications. As you can see, it's pretty much the exact same as on CarSpecs. So if this is your site, I do apologize for scraping your content, but this website basically has gone out and researched all of the information from the different car manufacturers, and then I've scraped their pages to get the same data that I can output in my own way. So they've got obviously all this information here. Now, ordinarily, I wouldn't recommend just flat out scraping someone's data, because it's not really the best way to build a programmatic site, because you want to be different. You want to use the data in a different way. This was really just me experimenting. I haven't tried to monetize the site in any way. There's no ads on there. It was really just a way to get the data so that I could try and build something around it and just see what happens. And then if the site took off, then I'd go out and really find a more long-term way to update the information on the website and not to straight up copy somebody else. So I use this as a jumping off point, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And the traffic on the site since March has been, well, this is the last 28 days. We've had 2,000 users. This is Analytics 4, which I don't fully understand, but I can see the gist of it. 2,000 visitors, the vast majority of which is organic traffic, which is interesting because in Ahrefs, there's not a lot. It doesn't seem to pick me up as ranking for a lot of keywords. This used to be a lot more. It's dropped significantly. So I must be ranking for some quite long tail stuff that even the keyword tools can't find, which is another reason to do programmatic SEO, because you can target these keywords that nobody else knows exist. Even you don't know they exist until you actually put the content out there and see what happens, which is why this sort of really large at scale model can work really well for long tail traffic, and just a different way of doing it than individual keyword research. So yeah, that's the traffic situation. And I'm just going to go into how I scraped the information and show you a little bit of the back end. I'm not going to do a full on like multiple hours deep dive. This is just an overview to give you an idea. So let's that's the site code, but we want to have a look at the scraper. So I've got a Python project here which basically scrapes AutoPadre, and there's a bunch of different ones. I've got a bunch in the sections for each of the different types of information that we're trying to scrape, because all the tables are different on the website, so we have to manually write these scrapers to target the right elements. So we'll just pick battery size. So the basics here are, I'm using concurrency, which means I can scrape multiple pages at the same time. And then when I scrape the URL, I'm basically getting the information, converting it to this. I'm using Beautiful Soup, which is a way to parse the HTML on the page, and then I can target specific elements. So really, we run this process function here with the make, the model, the URL. It finds the H2 with an ID, and then that becomes the years. Then it finds the tables, and then it creates our data structure that we can use to save to CSV. And then it's going to loop through all the tables on their page. So on Autopadre, if we go to the battery size page, we're basically finding all of these tables here. And then we can go through and scrape the information from all those tables. Now, some of the tables have got different column lengths. So some of them have got the table heading as the left-hand column. Some of them, it's the entire row. So I had to check that as well here with this if-else statement. And then we're just getting information about the make, model, year, trim, the group code, the imperial dimensions, and the metric dimensions. So just grabbing all the information from the table, basically. And then we're going to add it to this data frame, which is our storage structure. And then that goes back. All this gets done. We're doing like, I think concurrency was about, it's however many processors I've got. So I think it's about 16 on this computer. And then it comes back into the data frame here. Checks for if we're doing only errors, it will pick up the ones that failed and redo those, and then it saves them to exports, and then the file name, which is going to be battery size. So in the exports here, it saves it as a CSV file, nearly 8,000 rows, where all the information on the battery size for all these models is in a CSV. So that is how I've scraped it. I've got scrapers for all the different sections here. One thing with this site, which was painful, I mean, good job whoever owns Autopadre, because they used Cloudflare, so I had to get original, and with the scraping I had to use proxies and headless browsers and things to try and do it. So it was quite a complicated scrape. It probably took me about a week to write all of this properly to actually get the information. And then once it was working, as you can see here, look, we're checking if Cloudflare blocked it, then we had to log the error so we could come back and try it again later. So I tried to scrape it in stages. So, I mean, there's not that many pages on some of these. Some of them are huge, some of them aren't. So that one, oil capacity only had 800 rows. So it wasn't like I was hammering their server. So I just tried to do it in a respectful way just to try and get this data. So once I had the data, I could take it and import it into SQL, which I'm going to load up now if I can remember what the database was called. Probably this one. So here's the database that I have. And it's literally just an import of the CSVs. The only other thing I did was make a make slug and a model slug so I can access those. So if they had spaces in them, for example, then it would hyphenate it so we can access them as a part of a URL. And I've got a big database of information around cars. So that's how I scraped it. I could have hired somebody to do that for me, or a lot of these manufacturers do provide this information. There's databases that you can buy with this information as well. This was early this year when I built this site, so I didn't really look too much, to be honest, to see what was out there. So I probably, if I was going back, I would find something else that was a bit more ready-made that I could riff on and work on from there. What else do we have? Let's go back to the code. So we'll close that. We don't need that one. My framework is built in PHP. It's very sort of janky and it works, but it's my own thing, so it's not particularly robust. Basically, I'm using Composer to install a bunch of things. So Twig, mobile detection, a bunch of Twig extensions on here, Redis as well, so I can cache the database queries. And then everything happens from the public index PHP file. So all requests to any URL will come into this file. And here I'm loading up my helper, my boot file, which has got some general functions that I need to use in templates and stuff. Setting up Twig, this was just a copy and paste from the Twig tutorial. So I just chucked that in there. I've created a few Twig functions here, which I can use in my templates to do certain things, checking if it's mobile, if I'm using a plural or a singular, depending on how many cars or manufacturers there are for a given page, and then loading those up here. I've got a local check, so I can only run things or not run things depending on whether I'm working locally. And then a set environment variables, which is in my environment here, I've got my password details to log into the database, which obviously I'm local, so there's no password. And then I've got a very simple routing system here, which just picks the URLs that have been given to this index.php file, tries to find a template controller, which will do all of the heavy lifting to get the information from the database and then load the template. So if it doesn't find anything, it returns a 404 here. So basically, in the routes folder, I've got a bunch of classes, car routes. Here's all my routes. It's just good old-fashioned regex. So it's looking for battery size, and this is a single battery size. So for a specific spec, make, and model. So spec is battery size. It's captured that here, and then in controllers, we go to controllers. So this is the controller, cars, single, battery size. So controller, cars, single, battery size will load this file, which is very basic. It basically does a database query. It gets the data by make and model. So it's all the cars with the spec that I've provided, that basically decides which table to pull the information from. So it will get all of the cars where the make and model matches in the battery size table, which is the specs. Then I can group the codes by, I've got a helper function to group up unique battery codes. So I can say how many different types of code there are. So all this is just custom code that sort of manipulates the data so that I can show it in my template. Then I've got a very basic SEO titles and things here, H1, title, description, subtitle. I'm doing a canonical here, which is just getting the current URL. And then the page body, which is the meat and potatoes of the whole thing, is where I write the actual content for the page. So cars, stroke spec, stroke single. So this will be cars / battery size single. So if we go down here, close all this, into templates, cars, battery size, single. Here is the HTML. So I can use the variables that I set in the controller. So if I go back, page H1 here, this data array is passed to Twig, and I can access that with curly braces here. So page H1, and then as you can see, I'm adding in information. I'm using functions here. So this is this length function here will count the number of cars and then output that as a number. So I can say how many years of data we've got for these cars, make and model, and then I can grab array keys to get the most recent year. Sorry, the oldest year to the most recent year. So I can just show you that. Let me go back to here. So we want to go to battery size, Alfa Romeo, Stelvio. Let's do that. So from 2019 to the most recent model in 2019, there's only 1 year for that one. So let's go back and find one that's got more. So this one goes from 2013 to 2020, and it just changes it on the fly depending on what information we have. So that's pretty straightforward. Then I'm doing the tables. So we set up the header, the table header for battery size, imperial length, metric length, and then I can loop the code that I've got, the group codes, to output the group code, the imperial dimensions, and the metrics. These are all the unique ones that are available, and these are the unique ones, 51R and 151R. And then down here we can show you which models have 51R, which ones have 151R as their battery size. So this is just a quick sort of like summary table that shows you just the unique types of battery, and then you can jump to a specific model year to find your specific one. Okay, so here's where I create the jump link, and all I'm doing is jumping it to a specific ID by looping through the options for year in car years, and I'm setting it down here as the ID as year. So each ID, if this was 2022, that would be ID equals 2022, and then this is another loop, so it just loops it for all of the cars that we have in there. So if there's 10 cars, it will start at 2022, 2021, 2020, so on and so forth. And then it just pulls in all the data from this particular car that we're on in that loop. And hey presto, you've got a list of cars, 2022, 2019, and this section here is built for all of these by the same for loop right here. And that's it. That's a pretty simple way of doing the templating. As you can see, I don't think I've done I've not done any internal linking on this site, really, which is probably a bit of a mistake. What I could have done is obviously linked into the manufacturer page here, because obviously have the manufacturer. So I could have linked into Acura easily there, and then maybe linked into, in the sidebar here, I could have had a bunch of links to all of the other Acura models. So that's another way that I could quickly improve this site and hopefully get more traffic, get more pages indexed by doing some internal linking, which I haven't done. Again, this was pretty much a week to do the data and about 3 days to do this site, and I haven't touched it since then. So this has been untouched since March. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I can show you quickly the code for the home page. So in controllers, pages, home. So this is the home page code. What I'm doing, I've created a helper function here which gets all the specifications. So in modules and car helper, I've got this get specifications which has the slug and then a bit of information about each of them. And then what I do is loop through each of them and I get random cars for that spec. So I try and get 10 random cars so that on the home page, each one has the 10 random cars in the list, and then I can add a link to show all battery size, make and models. So it's just a nice way to do it. And then from there, we just got the make, all the makes by depreciation, the make count, the model count. This is really used to pre-fill the search form. So we pass them to the template and it pre-fills the search form. Then we're loading the page body, which is pages/home, and the hero, which is hero/home. Both of those are found inside the templates folder. So hero, home. So here's the hero. I've just put a background image, the home page, title, description, and then I'm including the form here, which I use in all over the site. So it's the same form, cars, form. So this is the form that I've generated here, and it uses the variables that I loaded up to populate the make and models, and it uses a bit of JavaScript to call an internal API to fill those lists up as you change the values. So pretty straightforward developer stuff, but it took me a long time to do. And now I can use it across the site. And then finally, we'll go to, close that off, and we'll go to pages and home. And this is the home template, which is really stupidly simple. It's just a simple for loop of all the cars that we have. So we loop the title in the car. So I can put the title in here. I'm doing it in columns of is6, which is a 12 column grid. So that'll be half of the page. And then it just loops through all of the different cars we have with links into them, which is what we see here. Your 2 boxes all the way down for every specification we have and all the cars that we've got from the database in that specification, with a link to the archive page, which just lists wiper size and all the manufacturers with all the different types of car. And that's pretty much how I would build a programmatic site in PHP. I can quickly show you the database class if you want to see that. So I have a core class here which has a bunch of stuff to connect to the database. Saving to Redis. If we have a Redis connection, I can send Telegram notifications if there's an issue with the site to my, like if Redis cache gets flushed here, I get a message to my Telegram channel, which basically tells me the cache has been flushed for this site. And then we've got the cars database, which is where all the heavy lifting happens, list of tables, and then a bunch of different helper functions, which I can call that pulls all the information. I've refactored this in a lot of my sites now, because as you'll see in all these functions, I'm using the same bit of code to check if Redis exists. This is just a way to try and get the information from cache before doing the database query. But I've actually moved all of that in my new sites to a core function, so I don't have to write the same thing in every function. That was a bit silly. It was a bit repetitive. So one of the programming mantras is dry, don't repeat yourself, and I have failed that terribly here. But yeah, so I'll probably move that to one function that I can control in the core class. This one just extends the original core database. So yeah, it's just basically SQL and really trying to figure it out as I go, using GPT-3 GitHub Copilot to help me write these queries. And that's pretty much it. I've got a redirect class as well. There's a table in the database for redirects, which I don't know if I'm using, just one. And I can't remember why I did that. Looks exactly the same to me. Oh, there's a plus 2, and it needs to not have a +2 in it. I'm not sure why I did that. I can't remember. But any old and new URLs that are added in here, the site would redirect from the old to the new before loading the page. So that's just a quick overview of how I would build a programmatic SEO site. I'm using very simple Bulma template, Bulma CMS for the templates, and that's in public here. CSS, I pull Bulma in. I've got a CSS class here, CSS file here that as I make changes to, I've set VS Code to automatically compile it to a minified version. This is the bit that gets used. JavaScript, there's nothing in there. I tend to use inline if I need it. If not, I won't use it at all. And that's basically it. I hope this helps for you to try and visualize how this might look for a project. If you are a developer, you probably are cringing with how I built it. And if that's the case, then great, because it means you can go out and build something better. But if you're not a developer, this could give you an idea of how you could structure it. And yeah, thanks for watching.